Okay, let's set the scene. The year is 2026. It's February. The US Supreme Court hands down a ruling that's an absolute bombshell. And just like that, they light the fuse on what could become a decade-long constitutional crisis. So let's walk through how this hypothetical but very possible future could play out. Now, to be perfectly clear, what we're about to explore is a speculative analysis. This is a look into one potential future, pieced together from current political tensions and some really interesting legal possibilities. We're going to trace how a specific chain of events could completely transform America's highest court as we know it. So every fire needs a spark, right? In our scenario, that spark happens in February 2026. The Supreme Court strikes down executive tariffs, which happens to be a major tool for the administration in power. Immediately, the White House frames this not as a legal disagreement, but as a direct political attack, judicial obstruction. And that creates the perfect storm, the political cover needed for a truly radical response. Okay, this is where things get fascinating. You might be thinking, wait, can they even do that? Change the court? Well, you'd be surprised. The court isn't as locked down constitutionally as most of us believe. Let's get into the mechanics of how it could actually be done. Here's the key thing to understand. The number 9 is not sacred. It's not etched into the Constitution anywhere. That number was set by a regular old law, the Judiciary Act of 1869. And here's the kicker. What Congress can do, Congress can undo. All it takes to change the size of the Supreme Court is a new bill. It's that simple. So, the path to a larger court would look something like this. First, a new Judiciary Act gets passed in the House. Easy enough. But then you hit the real bombshell, the move that changes everything, abolishing the legislative filibuster in the Senate. Without getting rid of that 60-vote rule, any court expansion plan is basically dead on arrival. But once it's gone, that bill can sail through the Senate with a simple majority. And here's a wild fact that catches almost everyone off guard. Guess how many formal qualifications there are in the Constitution to be a Supreme Court justice? 0. That's right, no age requirement, no citizenship rule, not even a requirement to be a lawyer or have ever seen the inside of a courtroom. It's all just tradition. And because there are no real rules, it means that, according to the analysis, even incredibly controversial figures could theoretically get the nod. For instance, Steve Bannon's past criminal plea doesn't legally disqualify him from federal office. Stephen Miller's lack of a law degree, not a constitutional problem. The only thing standing in the way is getting that simple majority vote in a post-filibuster Senate. So we've laid out the how, the legal path is there. Now let's look at how this could snowball into a whole decade of political and legal turmoil. The source material projects a 4-phase transformation that would essentially rewrite America's legal landscape. It all starts between 2026 and 2027 with that big legislative push to add new seats. Then you get the confirmation battles, which would make past hearings look like a friendly debate. By 2028, the new, larger court is in action, and you start seeing a radical shift in its rulings. But that leads to the final and most dangerous phase, escalation. From 2030 onward, you get a tit-for-tat cycle. The next party that takes power almost certainly retaliates, packing the court again to 15, maybe 17 justices, creating a political arms race with no end in sight. So, what would this kind of chaos actually do to the country over 10 years? The fallout would be massive. We're talking about a profound impact on the very foundation of our laws, on public trust in our institutions, and on the economy itself. The very first casualty in this war would be a core legal principle called stare decisis. It's a fancy Latin term that just means to stand by things decided. It's the idea of respecting precedent, and it's what gives our entire legal system stability and predictability. A court driven by pure ideology wouldn't see precedent as a guardrail. It would see it as a roadblock to be bulldozed. The new court's mission could be summed up in this one simple phrase: deconstruct the administrative state. The goal would be to tear down the federal agencies that run the country. And this isn't just some abstract theory. We're talking about targeting the legal foundations of the EPA's power to fight pollution or the Department of Education's role in student loans. These institutions, and others like them, would be systematically dismantled, ruling by ruling. And what does this do to the court's legitimacy? Well, public trust, which is already hovering at historic lows, would absolutely plummet. We're talking crisis levels. A huge chunk of the country would just see the court as another political weapon, and that could lead to a real nightmare scenario where states and cities simply start ignoring its rulings, leading to a genuine breakdown of the rule of law. The hit to the economy could be just staggering. Markets absolutely hate uncertainty. If the basic rules for contracts, for business mergers, for federal regulations suddenly become a moving target based on who's on the court that year, well, you're injecting a massive dose of instability right into the heart of the US and global economies. All of this, the expansion, the turmoil, the erosion of trust, it all leads to the most fundamental change imaginable, swapping out the entire philosophy that guides America's highest court. It would be a shift away from originalism, which, focuses on the Constitution's text and past legal precedent, to something called nationalist populism. In this new world, the main job of the court isn't to interpret the law as it's written. Instead, the focus becomes protecting executive power and pushing specific America First policies. So a huge business merger might be judged not on decades of antitrust law, but on whether it helps the administration's current national strategy. So let's just step back and look at the scorecard. In just one decade, you could go from a court of 9 to a court of 13, 15, or even more. From a legal philosophy of originalism to one of nationalist populism. From public trust being low to it being practically non-existent. And from a powerful federal government to one that has been systematically deconstructed. It's a truly revolutionary change. And this entire hypothetical journey leaves us all with one final, unavoidable question. If the Supreme Court stops being seen as a neutral guardian of the law and becomes just one more weapon in a brutal political fight, then what is its purpose in a democracy? What is it even for?